Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Collin, would you accept, subject to check, that the third rating agency, Moody's, has also stated that it is assuming that the reductions coming out of this proceeding will not be greater than those imposed under 285, and that it would be a negative consideration if that were the case?
I just don't know. And
all right.
I think you meant 258.
258, yes. Well, here, let's look at it then. I was hoping we could save some time on that. This is the Moody's report from July of 2018.
Okay.
Can you read into the record that highlighted material?
Our opinion recognizes that the revenue reduction is temporary. However, the magnitude is consistent with our belief that the political pressure on SC PSC could cause it to ultimately establish rates at unusually low levels. We also think it is unlikely the SC PSC would set permanent rates at levels that are lower than the temporary ones.
And if you could,
I'm assuming that is a reference to the N&D related rates.
And why would you assume that?
Because I think within the context of these different opinions or rating discussions that we've been reading, it's in conjunction with the discussion on the temporary rates or the rate reductions through the experimental rates. And so, the context leads me to believe that. All right, sir.
So it's your understanding that Moody's is specifically rating SC&G's obligations related to NND, and that's what this refers to?
If it's contextually the same as the other ones that we looked at, then that would be my assumption. But that's all I can see of it right here.
So let's look at the rating. If you could blow up, please, the box under the green tab on the left-hand side of the top. That would confirm that Moody's outlook on SC&G is negative, right?
I don't know when this was issued, but according to that document, whenever it was issued, it says negative, but I don't know anything beyond that.
Right. We blow up the date on it then, right above it. So the date is July 23, 2018, correct?
It is, yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you notice that it was a BAAA3, which would be the lowest non-speculative, the lowest investment grade rating under Moody's structure, correct?
I don't think there's a BAAA3. There's a BAA3, and that's the lowest investment grade rating.
Yes, that's the lowest of the investment grade ratings. So you would agree with me that all three rating agencies either have SC&G at the edge of speculative rating or actually below it, and all three have given indications that the result of this proceeding could result in those rates going lower, correct?
No, I don't think I can agree with that. I think we had a discussion earlier about the term speculative. I don't know what that means, but this is the lowest investment grade rating.
Turn your attention for a minute to the issue of securitization. You've testified about securitization. You present that as a possibility, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that there's currently no legislation allowing securitization for SC&G's obligations. Is that correct?
Yes, and I do state that in my testimony.
Correct.
It's not that the company could not pursue securitization on its own, but typically the market is not robust, shall we say, for that type of type of financing without some form of a governmental guarantee.
Correct. And the typical way securitization works is a statute is passed, and the statute creates an obligation, in this case for the commission, to set rates that would allow the repayment of the securitized obligations, and that would be handled through some sort of special purpose entity with a trustee, and the money would then go from the ratepayers through the company to trustee to repay the securitized debt.
Yes, I would agree with that. With respect to your reference for the company, that would be the utility, in this case, South Carolina Electric and Gas, and the utility would essentially become a collection agent for the special purpose entity. and the money that was collected from customers wouldn't even be included in its revenues, or the remittance of those funds to the special purpose entity wouldn't even be considered an expense.
And you would agree with me that the security for that securitized investment would be the statute that was adopted, setting those things in place, correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Right.
That's an important component of securitization financing.
And the cost, the terms of securitization, what could be accomplished under it, depend very much on the terms of the legislation that's passed. You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
I would agree with that. The underwriters for securitization debt or the special purpose entity would have to consider how strong that language is in the enabling legislation, and that would then affect the pricing of the debt.
They would also have
the
to
interest rate.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
In other words, the interest rate.
Correct. And they would also have to make a determination as to what the likelihood would be of the legislature changing its mind and changing those statutes later, wouldn't they?
Well, that would be a consideration among others, other considerations.
And can you foresee any difficulties in making that sale at this point?
The market generally will adapt to conditions, and I can't tell you precisely what the market would price such securitization debt at, or what terms and conditions would be required, or how robust those terms and conditions would need to be. But there would need to be some type of governmental assurance.
And so until we have that statute, we're not sure what could be accomplished or what could be saved under securitization. You would agree with that?
I think that's right. I bounded it in my testimony using a 4% and 5% interest rates, but those are hypotheticals, no question about it, in the absence of legislation.
And you would expect that when securitization takes place, SCG would take the proceeds of the securitization transaction and eliminate debt from its balance sheet, pay off debt, and otherwise restructure its capital. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It could use the proceeds to fund any hole in equity, and it could use a portion of the proceeds to repay debt. So South Carolina Electric and Gas would have a lot of flexibility with how it used the funds, and presumably would use them prudently to reduce their costs, because that's the idea. You get these costs off your books, and you resolve the credit metrics by doing so through the infusion of cash from the special purpose entity.
And certainly part of that would have to go to reducing the $5.5 billion in debt on SCG's balance sheet if we were to securitize this, correct?
Yeah, well, the debt would go off the balance sheet because you would use a portion of the proceeds to repay some of that outstanding debt. And you could arguably use all of the proceeds. Let's say, for example, you got $3 billion of proceeds. You could use that to reduce $3 billion of debt. Or you could reduce $2 billion of debt and then rebuild your equity by $1 billion. A lot of different options. When the cash comes in, I'm sure SCANA or Dominion would have a way of optimizing the value of it.
And I take it from our previous discussion that you haven't looked at SC&G's first mortgage bond indenture or terms.
I have not looked at the indentures, although I believe that we did receive that in response to ORS discovery. What I did look at was the level of what are known as make-whole provisions under existing debt. And we asked the applicants to provide a calculation of what the make-whole provisions were under the existing debt. So in other words, if you retire or redeem debt prior to its scheduled maturity date, many debt issues have a penalty, a prepayment penalty, if you will. And so they did. The applicants did provide that information, and it. My recollection is that it would be approximately $20 million on average per year, which would be well within the estimate of 4 to 5% interest rate that we we assumed when we quantified the effects of securitization finance. But you're right, there would be these make-whole provisions, or there are make-whole provisions on certain of the company's debt issuances.
Isn't it the case that on a $3 billion refinancing, SC&G would have make-whole obligations of $1 billion?
I don't think it was that high. My recollection is that it was roughly $20 billion a year. I'm sorry, I misspoke. $20 million per year. In other words, it would add $20 million per year over, let's say, 30 years, maybe $600 million or something like that over a 30-year period. So it would increment the interest rate on its outstanding long-term debt by maybe 1/4 percentage point was my rough estimate.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. You take the position that the Toshiba payment should be entirely credited to expenses prior to March 12 of 2015. Is that correct? N&D cost.
Credited against or as a reduction to the N&D cost, right. And that's consistent with both of the applicants' plans, the customer benefit plan in the sense that the $1.1 billion in Toshiba proceeds would be part of the upfront rate credit under the customer benefits plan, or if there is no merger, then what SCE&G proposes is that it be used in its entirety to reduce whatever the allowed N&D costs are.
You're aware that if SCE&G had canceled the project in either 2015 or 2016, there would have been no Toshiba payment?
I don't know that to be the case. That would be a hypothetical, but I don't know that to be the case.
All right. Now, you're also aware that the the Toshiba payment was based on a percentage of the payments made under the contract as that percentage rolled forward over the course of the years, correct?
Which contract?
The EPC contract under which the units were built.
I think it was a negotiated amount to resolve the parental guarantee. Toshiba guaranteed Westinghouse's performance under the EPC, and when Westinghouse indicated that it, well, first of all, it went into bankruptcy, and second of all, indicated that it would reject the EPC contract, then that implicated the Toshiba parental guarantee. And there were calculations, claims made by SCANA, and Toshiba had differences, and they resolved on a dollar amount. So I don't know, to more directly answer your question, you could build up the dollar amount, and both sides did. Toshiba did, and so did SCANA, but there was a settlement. So I don't know if that was actually predicated upon a specific calculation or if it was just a negotiated amount. I believe the latter.
Are you aware that under the EPC contract, the amount of the guarantee payment, amount of the damages that could be collected, was a percentage of the ongoing amount of payments under the contract, such that had the Toshiba, had the plant been canceled earlier, there would have been less payments, and therefore the Toshiba settlement would have been lower?
That may be true. I'm not familiar with that specific provision of the EPC.
Let me ask you to think back on, or direct your attention back to the discussion we had about bankruptcy and about the company's ability or inability to meet its financial obligations. And you and I both agree that the company is now rated at the one rating agency at the first level below investment grade, which most people refer to as speculative grade. And other rating agencies have said, all three have said, that further downgrades are possible. Let me ask you to have a look at the document that's being presented here, which is the Standard & Poor's Global Ratings Definitions as of October of 2015. And let me direct your attention to the highlighted double B. which is the rating that is one level into speculative category. Would you read that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious if this is an exhibit of anyone's testimony or where it came from.
It came from Standard & Poor's Global Ratings definition. It is a public document. It's a public rating document. We're dealing with a financial expert who I believe should be familiar with the terms he's using, one of which is what are the ratings, and we're impeaching him on this basis.
Proceed.
Could you read into the record what Standard & Poor's says a double B rated credit, what the risks are concerning that? 2 sentences.
An obligation rated BB is less vulnerable to non-payment than other speculative issues. However, it faces major ongoing uncertainties or exposure to adverse business, financial, or economic conditions that could lead to the obliger's inadequate capacity to meet its financial commitments on the obligation.
So the rating agencies are saying if you're rated at that level, you are subject to major ongoing uncertainties or exposures to adverse business, financial, or economic conditions that could result in an inadequate capacity to meet financial commitments. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. I mean, that's the whole nature of debt rating, to assess the risk to the creditor of issuing the debt or extending the credit to the borrower.
Inadequate capacity to meet financial commitments means you can't pay your bill.
That's what that means in that context.
And in this proceeding, ORS, by your admission, has not made any assessment of the impact of its rate proposals on SCE&G's financial integrity or the credit metrics. It has asked for a set of rates that are substantially lower than the rates that have been imposed by the General Assembly. And it's your position that the Commission does not need to look at whether this would jeopardize the financial integrity of SC&G, is it not?
I don't think any of that is correct. We've gone through this multiple times, but our assessment is that with respect to the recovery of the N&D costs, the rate would be just and reasonable. With respect to the issue of whether or not the rates would be less than the net of the revised rates less the experimental rate offset, the answer to that is that actually our proposal provides a greater recovery with respect to the N&D costs, because the tax savings, both the ongoing tax savings and the regulatory liability one-time refund, are something that is unrelated to the N&D cost and is consistent across all of the plans. Quantifications are a little bit different, but all three plans, the ORS Optimal Plan, Customer Benefits Plan, and the No Merger Benefits Plan, it's consistent. So then with respect to the impact on the company's overall financials, that isn't something that this Commission, I don't think it can control if it sets just and reasonable rates for the recovery of N&D costs without increasing them for other considerations. In other words, what Dominion is now arguing is that, listen, if you adopt the ORS plan and you determine what the allowed costs are and what the appropriate rate of return on those costs are, we need something more to offset the effects of the disallowance. And you have to ask yourselves, is that appropriate? And that's what is being argued here.
You would agree that all rates set by this Commission have to be just and reasonable, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. Mr. Reed.
Good morning, Joe Reed from McGuire Woods on behalf of Dominion Energy. Good morning, Mr. Collin.
Good morning.
I've got a fair amount of ground here to cover, but I'm going to try to move through it as crisply as I can.
Fair enough.
Before the lunch hour. What I'd like to spend our time talking about is the proposed merger and the associated benefits plan that Dominion has offered on the one hand, and the ORS optimal benefit plan on the other. All right, sir?
Yes.
And maybe we can start with this. I want to put up on the Elmo a page from your direct testimony, if we can. Where you were asked the question about ORS's position on the proposed merger. And do you see, Mr. Collin, on page 62 of your direct testimony, where that question was asked, what is the position of ORS on the proposed merger?
Yes, I do see that.
And am I correct that your response was that ORS does not oppose the proposed merger, subject to various additional conditions necessary to ensure that the public interest is protected and customers are not harmed? Did I read that correctly?
You did.
All right,
yes.
sir. And we're going to talk a good bit about that in a moment, but I want to skip down to line 13 of your answer, where you further said ORS recognizes that Dominion offers significant financial resources and economies of scale that should result in improved service and lower costs to customers. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And I think it goes without saying that ORS would support a result from this proceeding that results in improved service and lower cost to customers. Is that fair?
I think so, yes.
Right. And in fact, a solution which provides the greatest certainty for reliable service to customers at just and reasonable rates is what this commission should be searching for here. Would you agree with that?
These are considerations, yes. Certainty and the effect on customers are certainly two valid considerations.
Right, sir. So let's talk a little bit about the Dominion merger plans, if we can. And I know you said that you've read all the testimony in this case. I assume that you have given a fair amount of study to the details of the proposed customer benefits plans that Dominion has advanced with SCANA in this case.
Yes.
So,
at least, yes, I think that I've read all of the testimony. I'm fairly certain that
there's a fair amount of it. But as part of your analysis in this case, in recommending the ORS optimal plan over either of the two Dominion plans, you gave a fair amount of attention to the details of the Dominion plans. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I would like to pass out a document and have it marked for identification, if I may. While Mr. Patterson is passing that out, I'm going to put the document up on the screen and ask you this question. Colin, you understand that Dominion has offered two plans in this case, one with its original application, and then one which was presented by way of supplemental rebuttal testimony in this matter. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And I'm going to call the first plan, the original customer benefits plan, Plan A, and the alternative plan, which was developed at the request of certain stakeholders to this case and filed with the supplemental rebuttal testimony, I'm going to call that Plan B. All right, sir?
I understand.
And if we can, I just want to ask you some questions about the elements of these different plans and your understanding of them, beginning with Plan A. Now, is it your understanding, Mr. Collin, that Plan A is the plan that includes the upfront refunds and then the more modest rate subsidies or rate credits, buy downs over time. Is that fair?
My understanding is that Plan A is the customer benefits plan, and Plan B is the alternative customer benefits plan that came in through the testimonies of Mr. Farrell and Mr. Purohit, supplemental rebuttal testimony.
Yes, sir. All right, so let me ask you about that. In Plan A, and there was some discussion about this earlier, that's the plan that provides for the $1.3 billion in upfront cash payments to customers, right, sir?
Right, that's correct, and no offset to the N&D costs.
And we'll get to that in a moment. And I know you mentioned on cross-examination earlier that you hadn't analyzed the details of how much each customer might get under that refund proposal. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct. That was Mr. Seaman Wynn.
And do you understand, though, as a general matter, that the $1,000 would go to the residential customer who was using during the test period an average of 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a month?
I have an understanding that far, yes.
So if the average KWH usage was higher than 1,000, then the customer would get more than $1,000, right?
Well, of course, but then conversely, if the average monthly usage was less, it would be less than 1,000.
Fair enough.
These are average amounts, and I understand that.
Some folks could get quite a bit more than $1,000, and some folks would get a little less. Is that fair?
I don't know that it would be quite a bit more and a little bit less, but more or less, I would agree with that.
Let's not quibble over.
Okay, fair enough. We agree on that? Okay, more or less, right.
Everybody's going to get something.
Got it.
Okay,
Yes.
and then Plan A also provides for this, what I'll call the buy down, over about an 8-year period of the rate funded by $575 million in Dominion cash. Is that consistent with your understanding?
Yes.
And then there's some differences in the NND rate base, which I think are significant that I want to talk to you about here. Under Plan A, is it your understanding that over 20 years, the company would recover the capital and a return on capital based on a $3.3 billion rate base, roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And given you mentioned that the total expended on the N&D efforts by SCANA was about $4.7 billion, if I recall that correctly. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So the delta between the 3.3 and the 4.7, which is $1.4 billion, as we see here, that would be written off the balance sheet, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And under Plan A, it's your understanding there's a 10.25% return on equity and 5.85% cost of debt built into that recovery scheme, right?
That's correct.
And then the CCGT, the Columbia Energy Center combined cycle facility, cost of that would be excluded from rates, right?
Yes.
$361 million of regulatory assets excluded from rates, correct?
Yes.
Now, your testimony, and I'm not faulting this, but you speak in terms of revenue requirements generally, as opposed to the customer rate. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct, because I focused on the amount of recovery in total, the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of recovery in total. Then somebody has to take that down to the customer level, and that involves a series of allocations based on different factors. For example, how much goes to residential, how much to commercial, how much to industrial, and then within the class, how much goes to each customer. That's something that Mr. Seaman Wynn addressed in his testimony.
Fair enough. So Mr. Seaman Wynn takes the revenue requirement and turns it into a rate.
That's correct.
Because the rates, what the customers are actually paying, is so significant in this case, I'm going to ask you some questions about rates versus revenue requirement, but if you're uncomfortable answering any of those, you just let me know. All right, sir?
Okay.
And do you understand generally, based on your review of Mr. Seaman Wynn's testimony and the Dominion testimony, that under Plan A, the typical residential bill would fall from the pre-temporary rate level of about $147.30 to around $137?
I don't know.
You don't know. We'll have to ask.
I recognize the $137 per month, but I don't know what the starting point was. That That's Mr. Seaman Wynn.
All right, sir. Fair enough. So let me turn to Plan B for a moment. And as a general matter, do you understand that Plan B foregoes the upfront refunds for customers and instead loads up or drills down on reducing that permanent rate over time? Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct. And the $1.03 billion is consistent with the Toshiba proceeds, and it would be used to reduce the N&D costs. And then the $880 million is not something additional. It's the effect of reducing the N&D costs in rate base over the 20-year period. That sums up to about $880 million.
All right, sir. Well, you sort of beat me to the punch on my question.
Sorry.
Well, you answered it just fine.
Okay.
You answered it just fine. You made some comments just a few moments earlier this morning about how ORS doesn't like Plan A and the refunds because they're getting the Toshiba money up front, but then they're having to pay it back over time. Is that a fair characterization?
Right. And the $1.03 billion and the $880 million together addresses that issue.
Right. So in ORS's mind, Plan B sort of diffuses that issue that y'all have with Plan A. Is that fair?
I don't know if our ORS has a mind, but in my mind, yes, it does diffuse.
You're here representing ORS, right? So
That's
I want to.
fair enough.
You're
Yes.
committing them to a position here. All right, fair enough. So Toshiba's out of the way under Plan B. Now let's talk about the rate base.
Well,
That's-
wait, did you skip the 575, or you're just focusing in on Plan B?
I'm on Plan B. With
Okay,
the
right, sure.
$1.03 billion and 880, which comes
Okay.
up to about a little over 1.9 billion in cash that would be part of that benefits plan, right?
Right, right.
So
And
turning to the rate base, which is pretty significant here, under Plan B, the authorized rate base for N&D to be recovered over that same 20-year period would be $2.772 billion. Is that consistent with your understanding?
Correct.
Right? And that's different from the 3.3 in Plan A, right?
It is.
Now, there has been a lot of discussion, several days actually, of discussion in this case on the prudence issue, and I know we got more to come related to the N&D project. And is it your understanding, Mr. Collin, that ORS's position is no costs should be recovered related to the project that were incurred after March 12 of 2015?
That is my understanding, yes.
And we heard Mr. Gary Jones testify to the converse that, or on the other side, that ORS is not contesting the prudence of costs incurred prior to March 12 of 2015 in this case. Is that consistent with your understanding?
That's consistent with my understanding, but this testimony needs to stand on its own.
And so going back to the $2.772 billion figure here, is it also consistent with your understanding that that is the level of invested capital in the N&D project as of March 12 of 2015?
Yes.
All right, sir. So all this...
If I could just interrupt you, these numbers with respect to the 2.772 are on a total company basis, not a South Carolina retail. And that's the only distinction there.
Fair enough. But those, it would be allocated in rates subject to the jurisdiction of this commission to the retail customers, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So under Plan B, as offered by Dominion, customers wouldn't be paying anything going forward for any investments made on or after March 12 of 2015, right?
That's correct.
That sort of takes that whole prudence issue out of play on that front. And then the ROE is lower in Plan B, right? 9.9% is proposed versus the 10.25, right?
Yes.
And then the 5.5% cost of debt that is built into Plan B, do you understand that that is the recommended cost of debt that ORS has used in its proposal?
Yes, that's the actual cost of debt right now.
Fair enough. And then the free power plant and the $360 million of reg assets that are written off, that's the same in Plan B as it is in Plan A, right?
Yes. That's,
I know, again, you're not the rates expert, but do you have an understanding that under Plan B, the estimated typical residential bill would fall from that $147 and change level to $126.96 a month if approved by this commission?
right. And in part, that would be due to the fact that there was no upfront cash payment to customers.
All right, sir. So under both Plan A and Plan B, you wouldn't disagree with me that Dominion is proposing to bring just shy of $2 billion in fresh cash to the table to fund this customer benefits plan.
I'm not sure where you came up with the $2 billion,
All right, well,
because, or in fresh cash, because the Toshiba proceeds belong to the customers, and that's true under all three plans, all four, if you include the no merger benefits plan. The Toshiba proceeds under four plans belong to the customers. And then the 880 is simply the return on the Toshiba proceeds in nominal dollars over the 20-year recovery period. So that is not analogous to the 575. The alternative CBP, or the Plan B, takes away the 575. So it's you need to make sure that it's clear what these amounts represent.
All right, sir. And I do want to be precise here, and I know that you're a master accountant, and I want to be exacting on when I'm talking about the accounting here. On the
I could
Toshiba,
actually laugh at that more than you can.
Yeah.
I think it's very entertaining.
So on Toshiba, I mean, Mr. Collin, you understand what happened with the Toshiba funds, and that it's going to use that to pay down debt or avoid issuing debt. And I don't think ORS is quibbling with that. But there is no Toshiba money. There's no Toshiba pile of cash right now, right, sir?
Right.
Okay.
It would have to be financed in some form or fashion.
And then, yes, sir. And the way the benefits here are going to be financed, the $1.3 billion, the $575 million, $1.03 billion, and $880 million under Plan B is through cash off of Dominion's balance. Is that not your understanding?
I've seen the testimony to that effect. Basically, Dominion has said we will push cash through SCANA into SCE&G and rebuild SCE&G's equity position.
Fair enough. And that's the question I was asking just a moment ago. When I said Dominion's bringing fresh cash, it's Dominion's retained earnings, Dominion's equity that it is providing to fund those components of the plan.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Dominion's getting the cash. I mean, they could borrow it short term for all I know, but that's why I just want to clarify the premise in your question. But in any event, it's funds that are being brought to the table by Dominion.
Great. That's the point that I was trying to make. And then the write-offs here, and I know some of these write-offs are in SCEG's plans and ORS's plans as well, but you got $1.4 billion, $180 million, $361 million. That's almost $1 billion. $1.958 billion, $80 million, and that's a little over $2 billion, right, sir?
Yes.
So you wouldn't disagree with me, would you, Mr. Collin, that under either Plan A or Plan B, there are a total of $3.4 billion or more in concessions for the customer? I know you say they're not enough, but that's what's in these plans, right?
I have not actually added up everything, but it is what it is. There is value in each one of these plans. Neither one, however, matched the ORS optimal plan. Even though certain components line up, there are certain components that still do not line up. For example, what is not shown on this chart are the tax implications of all of these plans. Those are significantly different.
We may talk about that in a little bit when we get. But and I wasn't trying to trick anyone with the math. I was just saying 1.3 and 575 is almost 2. 1.
Mr. Reed, when you get over near the Elmo, make sure that mic leans towards you, because we getting live streamed globally, and you got a global accountant, so we need to keep all this where everybody out there can hear it.
I'm going to do my very best. But again, Mr. Collin, on the math, we got about $2 billion up top here and about $2 billion down below here. That's where I was getting the $4 billion in concessions.
Yeah, I understand, yes.
All right, sir. And you know, do you not, based on your review of the testimony, including the testimony of the SC&G witnesses in this case, that SC&G has said very clearly that it can't provide this level of benefits to the customer on its own?
I know, I've read that testimony. I would disagree, but in any event, I've read that testimony.
All right, sir. So let me do this, change gears here for just a moment, and let's drill down a moment on this issue of what's the N&D component of rates going to be going forward for the customer under these various alternatives that are before the commission. And what I'll do is flip to page 2 of this chart. See that, Mr. Collin?
When you shift that thing, don't talk till you get back in front of your mic, okay? Or if we can get you a lavalier if we need to.
Let me try to do a little bit better with it.
Okay, we'll give you one more shot.
So, looking at page 2 here of this exhibit, Mr. Collin, I know a moment ago you said you weren't entirely familiar with the rate levels as of May of 2017. Do you see here where that's represented as $147.53 as the total bill before the temporary rate was enacted, with an N&D component of $25.10?
I see that, but I have no way to validate it.
All right, sir. Well, we'll ask Mr. Seaman Wynn about that, or Dominion's witnesses. Now, I guess likewise, you would say you're not familiar with what the rates would be under the base plan offered by SC&G or the no merger benefits plan, which are reflected in these second bars on the bar graph. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know if these reflect the SCE&G proposal for ongoing tax reductions or the one-time savings. Perhaps you could tell me whether or not they do. If they do not, then under the ORS optimal plan, when we get to the end, that really is not an apples-to-apples comparison. So if you know, I would appreciate you sharing that with me. If you don't know, then that's something that we should find out.
All right, sir. Well, I'm going to follow the same rule Mr. Ziegler had, which is I get to ask the questions, and I'm not up here to answer them, and I'm not trying to hide anything from you. But if you can't answer my question, then we'll ask another witness about that. Fair enough?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what this was portraying, because, as I said, I have not seen this before. These are your calculations. I'm asking you to clarify what you're presenting up here, and basically testifying to and asking me, it doesn't say that. And it certainly says whatever we can all read that it says, but I'm trying to ask, I'm asking you if you could perhaps give me some understanding of what these numbers are, because I certainly cannot affirm them.
All right, sir. Let me ask it this way. In your testimony, as we said before, you're focused on the revenue requirement, right?
True.
The revenue stream over time.
Yes.
You know from that testimony that the revenue requirement under the SCE&G base plan, the no merger benefits plan, and all these other plans going forward is lower than it was in May of 2017, right?
I do understand that, but for comparative purposes, I think without any confirmation from you, I would think that all of those graphical representations, until you get to the last one, do not include the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Oh, so you're on. I mean, I will give you this, that in the Dominion Plan A and Plan B bars represented here, it does include the benefits of tax reform.
Only with respect to the recovery of the N&D costs, and let's be very careful here. I don't think that these bars, except for the last one, reflect the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on the non-N&D part of the company's business.
So is it
My understanding is that that last block, if you've correctly modeled or shown the ORS optimal plan, it does have those tax savings in there.
Fair enough. So, and I'm not trying to trick you here, Mr. Collin. You would say it's your belief that this 126.96, which is the rate or the Plan B of Dominion, does not include the benefits of tax reform?
Well, I don't think it does, but you can't confirm one way or the other.
Well,
I don't get to ask questions.
It does. I'm confirming it does.
It does?
It does include the benefits.
Well, it includes the effects on the N&D costs, correct? And not the everything else. I know I don't get to ask the questions, but I don't know what that shows.
I'm going to allow you this one question. Yes, it's the all-in effects of tax reform.
Okay.
All right, sir?
I have no way of knowing whether that's correct or not, but
Fair enough.
I'll accept your representation just for purposes of discussion.
We'll follow up on that with the Dominion witnesses. But what my point here is, Mr. Collin, is that what we see in these bars is the N&D component of rates, right?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I don't think it reflects the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act beyond the N&D costs, but you know that's subject to your confirmation or lack thereof.
Fair enough. You see this bar here, Mr. Collin, which is labeled H4375. I'll represent to you that is the N&D component of rates currently in effect under the temporary rate enacted by the General Assembly. You have any reason to dispute that?
I don't know how that translates to the customer rate.
Now, you understand from Mr. Seaman Wynn's testimony that in year one of the ORS optimal benefits plan, the typical residential rate would be $116.77. Is that correct?
Right, and that includes the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on an ongoing basis. It includes the one-time refund for the 2018 deferrals associated with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it reflects the merger savings. So to the extent that none of the other ones reflect any of that, then it's really not a fair comparison.
All right, sir. And so that 583 that we see here, that would equate, would it not, to the 20.93% reduction in rates from what was in effect before the temporary rate that you referred to in your testimony earlier, right, sir?
Yes, if the 20.9% reduction is correct, and I accepted that subject to check based upon prior counsel's representation.
Fair enough. And last question, and then we'll move on. And I'm not asking you to verify the 453 or the 291 here, but would you agree with me, sir, from a mathematical standpoint, that the Dominion Plan B proposed NND rate is about $1.62 higher than the temporary rate currently in effect of $2.91?
I
453 minus 291 is $1.62.
Okay, your pen was drifting over to the left on another block, and so if you're looking at those two, the difference between those two is $1.62.
$1.62, yes. Right? So that's about 1.3%, is it not, of $125?
I'll accept that subject to check.
Fair enough. In other words, if this commission were to approve the Dominion Plan B, customer rates on 1/1/19 would go up by about 1.3%.
Yes, again, subject to check.
Right. Now, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether I got a number on that exhibit. I had asked that it be marked for identification.
It's marked as exhibit number 52.
Thank you. And unless ORS doesn't object, since Mr. Collin couldn't verify a number of these figures, I will wait until the Dominion witnesses support them before I move its admission.
Agreed.
So let me turn now, Mr. Collin, to a couple more questions that I have about this number, which is the $2.772 billion rate base under both the Dominion Plan B, and am I correct that that's the starting point for the ORS optimal plan in terms of the rate base?
It is a starting point. It represents the allowed N&D costs on a total company basis.
And when we say it's the starting point, I want to walk through with you how we get from ORS's starting point to its ending point. And to do that, I'm putting up page 9 of your surrebuttal testimony on the screen. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
And I'm going to focus here on table 2 in your surrebuttal testimony, page 9. So under the ORS recommended plan, we're starting here at a rate base of $2.684 billion. And is that the 2,772 allocated to the retail customers?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the starting point. And then, to put it in simple terms, if I can, you are layering in or adding on, piling on these regulatory liabilities for the Toshiba proceeds, a return on the Toshiba proceeds, the refund of revised rates, the return on refund of revised rates, subtracting off of that $2.7 billion rate base. Is that fair?
Right, and then adding and subtracting various tax issues.
And that's what I was going to get to. That those last lines are not monkeying with, that's a bad way to put it, but adjusting for various tax increases and decreases, right?
Yeah, it turns out that they're pretty significant. Yeah.
They are. And I know we're going to hear from Mr. Warren on behalf of Dominion a great deal about those. Now, everybody in the room will be relieved to know that I'm not going to spend an hour going through all of these different adjustments you have. I'm going to go straight to the bottom line. And am I correct, Mr. Collin, that the allowable rate base under the ORS optimal plan is $712.7 million? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's compared to the $4.7 billion that was actually spent on the project. Under ORS's optimal plan, the company would recover just a shade over $700 million, right?
Well, it's if you go to the preceding table, what it would recover is $906 million. And there's a difference between what it would recover in terms of the amortization of costs over the 20-year period compared to rate base, because not every item has a rate of return associated with it. That's why I put two tables in there, so that the commissioners could see what the cost recovery would be in the table above the one that we're looking at, and compare that to the rate base, which is what the company would earn a rate of return on.
I think you're exactly right, Mr. Collin, that those are two different calculations. What I wanted to focus on, though, is in Table 2, the rate base, $700 million.
Sure, I understand that. I just wanted to point out, because your question asked about recovery of, and so I wanted to point out that those are two different numbers, related clearly, but two different numbers.
So just again, to go back and compare, under the ORS optimal plan, the allowed rate base would be $712 million. Under the Dominion Plan B, it would be $2.772 billion, right?
Yes.
And that's a $2 billion difference. That's a big difference, right?
Yes.
So,
well, and you know, part of the reason, I mean, a significant and fundamental difference is because of the payback under the Dominion merger, where customers have to pay back the Toshiba proceeds component of the upfront rate credit.
Now, hang on, Mr. Collin. That's in Plan A. I'm talking about Plan B here, right? Where you said Toshiba's taken care of because they're getting the $1.9 billion back over time, right?
Oh, I didn't realize you were talking about the alternative
Yes, sir.
CPP. Oh, I thought you were still looking at this chart.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Plan B.
All right.
So, let me ask you this question. You've read the testimony of Dominion's rebuttal witnesses in this case, right?
Yes, correct.
And I want to put up on the screen a copy of Mr. Farrell's rebuttal testimony, in particular, Dominion CEO, and this is page 4 of his rebuttal testimony, where he is asked, at line 5 on page 4, to be clear, if the ORS's optimal plan were to be adopted by the Commission, would Dominion Energy proceed to close the merger transaction with SCANA? Did you read that testimony?
I did.
And you read his answer where he said, no, it would not.
Yes, I did read that, and I have seen that in other merger proceedings as well, most recently in Texas, where there were a variety of potential acquirers, all of whom filed cases before the Texas Commission to acquire Encore Electric Delivery Company, and started with the Hunt family, and they walked away from the merger. Then it went to Berkshire Hathaway, and they walked away from the merger. Then it went to Next Era, and they walked away from the merger, again because of the Commission's conditions. Finally, Sempra Energy came, and they accepted those conditions, and the merger was closed.
Right, sir. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Farrell for a long, long time, and I know that he is a man of his word. Do you have any reason to doubt his word here that if this commission adopts the ORS optimal plan, that Dominion will not close the merger under those circumstances?
I have no reason to doubt his testimony on this point. That doesn't mean that there can't be a revised deal, or that there would not be another suitor, or that South Carolina or SCANA could remain independent. I mean, there are lots of options.
Lots of options. None of those other options are certain. Would you agree with me there?
Right. The Dominion merger is not certain either, for sure.
Dominion merger is a lot more certain than those alternatives that you just laid out, is it not, Mr. Collin?
I don't think so. In other words, there is clearly a divergence here between what ORS believes is the appropriate rate making and the recovery of the N&D costs under the optimal plan. And if that would cause Dominion to walk away, that's still the ORS position. In other words, the ORS plan is not dependent upon the merger. The merger will bring benefits if it is closed. There's no question about that. But the ORS optimal plan is not dependent on that merger, except for the merger savings rider, obviously.
All right. Mr. Collin, yesterday afternoon, I know you weren't here when Mr. James testified on behalf of ORS, but Commissioner Williams asked him some questions about the possibility of bankruptcy, which we've talked a little bit about this morning, and the ORS optimal plan. And he testified, the record will speak for itself, but he said basically it's worth the risk that might happen. Are you likewise telling this commission Dominion walking away because of the ORS optimal plan is worth the risk? The ORS plan is worth the risk that Dominion will walk away.
Well, I don't know what specifically Mr. James testified to and whether or not your representation of it is
the record will speak
correct.
for itself
Yeah,
on that.
Certainly. But we believe that the ORS optimal plan is the correct approach. It provides full recovery of the allowed N&D costs. It balances the interest of South Carolina Electric and Gas with that of its customers, and it's fair. We provide a rate of return on equity that doesn't even exist, and there are other benefits in the plan. For example, not providing a cash refund or a rate credit up front only to have customers pay it back over 20 years. And there are tax implications of that, too, that could redound negatively upon South Carolina Electric and Gas and its customers. I know that the company is committed, if there is a merger, that it won't seek to include those tax-related costs on customers. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that Mr. Warren has successfully navigated those waters. So I appreciate the condition, but in any event, I don't view this as framing it up as a matter of risk. I think that the ORS optimal plan, if South Carolina Electric and Gas remains standalone, independent as an affiliate subsidiary of SCANA, it will provide just and reasonable rates. And then there will be a period of time that the credit metrics will have to be repaired. And that is true whether there's a Dominion merger or whether there is not a Dominion merger or whether there is a merger with another party. The thing that Dominion offers is an accelerated restoration of credit metrics. But the ORS plan stands regardless of merger or no merger with Dominion or someone else.
Fair enough. Let me ask you just two follow-ups on that. Going back, Mr. Collin, to page 62 of your direct testimony, which we talked about at the outset of this cross-examination, where you said that you recognize Dominion offers significant resources and the merger would result in improved service and lower cost to customers. You recall that testimony?
I do.
And earlier on that page where you said you don't oppose the merger subject to all these conditions, including the ORS optimal plan being adopted, right?
Right, that's correct.
I just want to make it clear, ORS understands, you understand on behalf of ORS, that if that optimal plan, you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have the optimal plan and the merger. Does ORS understand that?
Well, I think that's made very clear in Mr. Farrell's rebuttal testimony. But we don't believe that it is essential to have this merger or essential to have Dominion close this merger. We do believe that it brings benefits, but it shouldn't come at a cost that increments up a just and reasonable rate to an excessive rate. And that's basically what the applicants are that's the choice that they're putting before you. They're putting before you, provide us an excessive rate, or otherwise we'll walk away. And we disagree with that.
I do want to spend some time with you, might be after lunch, whether rates are excessive or not. Hold that thought. But my last question, then to follow up on your answer, Mr. Collin, of just now. So we're clear, ORS is comfortable advocating to this commission that it, roll the dice that Dominion walks away by adopting the ORS optimal plan and hope that it will work out okay with another suitor or with SCANA standing alone.
Well, I don't think it's rolling the dice at all. I think you have a choice. The ORS optimal plan provides a just and reasonable rate, and one could even argue an excessive just and reasonable rate, just not as excessive as what the applicants propose. If then Dominion walks away, then there still are opportunities for SCANA and South Carolina Electric and Gas over time to repair their credit metrics.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I am ready to go into a different area. Would you like for me to continue or appropriate time?
Why don't we just go ahead and break now? We'll come back at 1:13.